Hello, I'm Ksenia Chernaya, certified nutritionist, certified health coach, and a member of the Russian Union of Nutritionists. You are watching our channel about healthy eating habits and healthcare. And today we are going to talk about how to regulate your appetite in order to want to eat less but feel full and energized. Many people struggle with the constant feeling of hunger, and so they eat more than they want to eat. Therefore, they feel discomfort in the gastrointestinal tract due to overeating. How to suppress appetite and severe hunger? In our body, the hypothalamus is responsible for feeling full, producing energy, storing and burning calories. The most important hormone that signals the hypothalamus to suppress appetite is leptin. Today's conversation is going to be about that. The hormone leptin itself is produced by adipose tissue and affects the brain. Leptin is the main regulator of energy balance, which is responsible not only for weight, but also for our behavior and mood. Normally, the content of leptin in the blood circulation obeys a circadian rhythm and is impulsive. In the morning, the level of leptin is low, and thus we want to eat. In the evening, the level of leptin is high, which signals us that we don't want to eat. Therefore, the hormone leptin is very strongly tied to our circadian rhythms and the time we go to sleep. But we will talk about this in more detail later. How does this work in a healthy person's body? Leptin is produced by adipose tissue, as we've mentioned before, and sends signals to the hypothalamus. If there is a lot of adipose tissue, then there is a little signal that we don't want to eat, that we're full. But what if we are talking about an unhealthy body? When we eat a lot of carbohydrates, when we struggle with emotional eating, when we have fractional meals at the same time we lack physical activity, then we end up with growing adipose tissue and a higher level of leptin. And sooner or later the hypothalamus becomes insensitive to leptin. This is called leptin resistance. Primarily obese people have high levels of leptin. They have impaired homeostasis, and the body can't produce enough leptin or produces too much of it. In the case of leptin resistance, the hypothalamus does not see the actual level of leptin in the body. At the same time, the hypothalamus seems to be experiencing a deficiency of leptin. This is where a constant feeling of hunger comes from. At the same time, the brain deliberately lowers the metabolic rate and the deposition in adipose tissue continues. Therefore, the main thing to do in order to normalize the appetite and not experience a strong feeling of hunger is to normalize the level of leptin in the blood. Moreover, if you check your leptin according to the test results, it should not exceed 10 nanograms per milliliter. Before talking about the rules of normalizing levels of the hormone leptin, you should also remember the lack of physical activity leads to leptin resistance. As always, we consider a combination of three factors. The first is a healthy diet and number of meals. The second is physical activity, and the third is sleep. The first and most important rule for normalizing leptin is having strictly 3 meals a day without any snacks. It's leptin resistance that provokes you into constant snacking. Therefore, we categorically refuse snacks. The only justification for fractional meals and snacks in a ratio is a disease of the gastrointestinal tract in the acute stage. But still, it lasts no more than 2 or 3 weeks, and then you should switch to 3 meals a day. The second rule is breakfast. You should have a breakfast strictly within 30-60 minutes after you wake up. Moreover, breakfast must necessarily contain protein foods. It will allow us to increase the sensitivity of the hypothalamus to leptin. The total daily protein intake averages 75-100 grams throughout the day. You must remember that at least 25-30 grams should be eaten during breakfast. At the same time, don't forget to supplement the portion of protein with a large amount of fiber. Why do we need it? Fiber helps to slow down the absorption of carbohydrates, which neutralizes their harmful effect on the microflora of our intestines. You should eat at least 400 grams of raw or thermally treated vegetables per day. You should choose depending on the condition of your gastrointestinal tract. If leptin resistance is strong enough, your leptin is in excess of 50, 60 or 70 nanograms per milliliter, then you also need to be careful with stretch vegetables like carrots or beets and eat them mostly raw. The next rule is reducing the amount of fructose that you can consume per day. You need to be very careful with fructose, as it disrupts the sensitivity of the hypothalamus to leptin. Therefore, we reduce the fructose level to 25 grams. During the normalization of leptin, I would advise you to cut fruits in your diet as much as possible and switch to berries. Berries contain much more nutrients and more fiber. We completely exclude all artificial sweeteners as well as high fructose syrups. If you have been using agave and topinambur syrup as a healthy substitute for sugar, you still must remove them from your radio. These syrups are 80% composed of fructose, which is no good when we deal with leptin resistance. The next rule for normalizing levels of leptin, and I would say that this is the second golden rule after the rule of 3 meals a day, is to restore circadian rhythms and have a proper sleep. To normalize leptin, you must go to bed strictly no later than 11 p.m. This is related to the work of our hormonal system. When the sleep hormone melatonin rises, the stress hormone cortisol, the hormones insulin and leptin decrease. If you don't go to bed before 11 p.m., there can be no normalization in leptin levels. At the same time, we must remember that dinner should be 3-4 hours before bedtime. This is also necessary. The next rule is to exclude refined processed foods. We clean out our ration, remove from our refrigerator all sauces, all semi-finished products, all commercially baked goods, all products containing flavor enhancers and artificial sweetness. All of these foods contribute to chronic levels of inflammation in the body and increase leptin resistance. The next rule concerns fats. We must consume polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fatty acids. This concerns butter, ghee. We make sure to use avocados, omega-3 fats, fatty fish, nuts and seeds. Next is the rule that concerns carbohydrates. Naturally, we only exclude refined carbohydrates from our diet. It's not necessary to completely exclude carbohydrates from our ratio, but you should consume cereals and legumes only once a day for breakfast or lunch. The rest of the time, you should add vegetables and herbs to each meal. This will be your source of carbohydrates. And as always, we return to our 3 whales of weight loss: a decrease in appetite and hunger. This is strictly 3 meals a day, and each of these meals must necessarily contain proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and of course the normalization of sleep. If you overlook at least one of these 3 factors, it will be quite problematic to suppress appetite. Follow our channel and don't forget to press the bell button to learn more life hacks which improve your well-being.